Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rich, and I'm joined by my guest, Sean Gomes. How you doing, Sean? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, I'm happy to have you on. You know, we talked a while back when I was the production assistant monkey for Dr. Tom. Not that hasn't gone anywhere. So it's cool to talk to you again. So, Sean, how long have you been playing PbtA games, and what was your gateway?
I started, I'd say, 3 years ago, roughly. Maybe 4 now. Started with Dungeon World, actually. My group had been going on for almost 7 years beforehand, playing 4th edition D&D and Traveller, and one of my guys who is a serial Kickstarter pointed me to this new game, quote-unquote. We hadn't really experienced anything powered by the Apocalypse beforehand, so Dungeon World was kind of an easy gateway because it was something that we understood the feel, right? We understood what it was trying to replicate, which was Dungeons & Dragons. So it was a very easy gateway to the wider world of Powered by the Apocalypse.
Nice. How long did you play that game?
Oh, that game lasted, I'd say probably a year and a half, but then it started petering out because I had started actually really itching to combine that with the Traveller stuff that we had been doing, which is where my own game came in. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a nice little cue up for what we'll talk about in just a minute here.
Sure.
Cool, so let's go ahead and read a sitch. Read a sitch. Sean, you mentioned something that happened that really shaped how you GM. You want to walk through that? I'm really interested in this story.
Okay, when we had started playing Dungeon World, the move that kind of caught my eye, so to speak, was Discern Realities, in which, on a partial success, it says that the GM should ask the player to define something. Now, my group came from a very traditional background. The GM gives the answers, the players say what they do, right?
Right.
The idea that the GM doesn't have perfect information, and that the players have information that the GM doesn't, or in fact that the players make up information on the spot that becomes true, was, it's going to sound silly, but it was like mind-blowing for me. So I started small, I occasionally let them fill out little details that were kind of inconsequential. And one day I just decided I'm going to blindly trust my player. I am going to say, I don't know. I'm going to accept the fact that as the GM, as the supposedly omnipotent being in the universe, I don't know what the answer to that question is. And it was very important. And it worked out brilliantly. It was a lot of fun. And I kept trying to push that further and further, to the point where I started a session with only the broadest outline of this scenario. The kind of thing that you'd see in the first line of a Netflix description of an episode.
Ooh.
The heroes are stuck in a cave, hunted by a horrible monster. That's it. I didn't know what the monster was. I didn't know where the cave was. I didn't know why they were there. I was tuning into an episode, and I trusted my players together to come up with reasons for why their characters would go there, what they were facing, why they knew that they were facing it, and it played so well, and my mind just went,
haha, man.
When the players came up with the solutions and the twists, the players were actually throwing in twists. And I'm like, I was entertained. And it was something that didn't happen very often as a GM, because normally I was racking myself to entertain others. And the idea that the GM could be entertained by the players by being surprised was something very novel and very new to me. And since then, I can't help but turn a question around from a player when they ask me, so who actually runs this town? I don't know. Who runs this town? I don't live in this universe. Your character does. You tell me. It's so much fun to be able to have that liberty to say, I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's a great liberty, but I still have those strings, the DNA in me that says, man, I feel like I'm being lazy. Like,
I know. It's like, shh, don't tell anybody that I'm not actually answering questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting to watch it go off the rails. It's interesting because the thrill I would have as a GM of a more conventional style game is when things came together the way I had anticipated so that I could stay slightly ahead of where things were going. And now, if you trust your players, you can ride behind like third person video game, man. Just kind of watch where they go and occasionally throw some stuff slightly ahead of them or let the dice decide. Yeah. Let's go ahead and open our brains to Uncharted Worlds. What do you say, Sean?
Sure.
Open your brain. All right, Sean. Uncharted Worlds is your game. You mentioned that some of the kernel of it is a little dungeon worldy. So tell me a little bit about Uncharted Worlds.
I guess you could say that Uncharted Worlds is kind of like a third generation Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's like it's part of the genus Dungeon Worldus, in that it doesn't exactly have a lot of the stuff that you'd see in the original Apocalypse world. Like there's no sex moves, for example, much to the chagrin of at least one person on Google+. That said, what I was going for with Uncharted Worlds, it was to take the idea of what Dungeon World tried to do, which is, let's see if we can use this rule set to replicate a feeling of another game. And I wanted to try to do the same thing with, I admit at the time I was very much into Mass Effect, into the Mass Effect series. So there was that space opera. There was Traveler, which was, I had just come off of a very, very long and very fun Traveler session. And the two together kind of just, I felt like, hey, why don't I try? It started off as a small hack of Dungeon World and kind of diverged very quickly into like, well, I like this, I don't like that, I like this, I don't like that.
Mass Effect and Traveler are the two biggest influences. So Uncharted Worlds, at least from, and again, I haven't had the chance to play Uncharted Worlds. I hear about it secondhand from a buddy of mine who's running a play-by-post, and I'm super jealous. But he said that it's a very wide open style of PbtA game. PbtA games often have a certain amount of focus, like, okay, Monster Hearts, you're teenagers, right? Dungeon World, you're adventurers. Apocalypse World, we've got a setting baked in. But in Uncharted Worlds, there's a lot more build up from the ground. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so that's where some of the kind of more traditional role-playing still kind of came in. I wanted to be able to tell a variety of different stories, anything from like colonists, of course, Firefly and all these other inspirations came in and affected it. I didn't really have the compulsion to focus it down on, okay, you are a group of salvagers, that is it, that's the story. I wanted to actually just provide a sandbox in which, leveraged a lot of the ease of use, the usability of the Powered by the Apocalypse, but gave a much broader scope to it all.
Okay.
Which is why I went with, instead of playbooks like most other Powered by the Apocalypse, I have a character creation system, which is, I guess you could call them mini playbooks, that you combine 3 of them together, which creates your own personal archetype. Of course, a lot of them are very referential to popular culture. That's space opera, right? But the way that you construct it, and there's a little bit of combos, so to speak. Like, I will take a military scoundrel, which will make me into this archetype, and I will take a clandestine personality, so I am that kind of archetype. And over time, it just evolved from that.
And there are mechanics into each of those kind of 3 pieces?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so each of those 3 pieces, the origin and the 2 careers, combine together to create an archetype, and within those, you're granted certain skills that will play off of each other. Skills that will change the way that basic moves work, for example. Skills that will make certain basic moves much better if you succeed at them, that kind of thing. So when you're making your character, you're kind of thinking, okay, what's the archetype that I want to go for? Well, I guess I could be this plus this equals my archetype.
One of the pieces of Powered by the Apocalypse that I found, that the mechanics, it came from other kind dice, and it's a hard setting. you succeed only on a 10 plus.
Right.
And most of the time, it's always that hard choice, right? So you get some of what you want, but not all of it.
Yeah.
With the setting of a space opera, how did that inform the way that the game works at the table for you? Like, were you able to still keep space opera even though the engine kind of drives towards something that's a little grittier?
So this I covered this actually in the GMing section. The consequences of a partial success in Uncharted Worlds has to do more with unintended side consequences rather than personal suffering, I guess you could call it.
Okay.
The situations when it's a partial success, and by the curve, partial successes are the most common.
Right.
When that happens in a space opera, it's less about the cost of doing something, which is very melodramatic. There can be a lot of melodrama in space opera.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, one of the big costs, one of the big, sorry, I did air quotes there. One of the big air quotes costs is things like property damage, explosions, trying to make things flashy and big and bombastic rather than gritty and suffering and internal moral choices. There are still consequences, but those consequences are encouraged to push for more action rather than to push for more introspection.
I like that. So you push kind of along the swashbuckling spectrum of space
exactly.
opera.
Space swashbuckling. Wow, that is a mouthful.
I like that. That's great. Other than what we've talked about with that partial success, what would you say, what are the other mechanics that are really different here versus Apocalypse World or even Dungeon World?
Of course, the character creation, as we talked about before.
Right.
Aside from that, the main mechanic that I kind of did away with entirely, and this is going to sound strange coming from Traveler, is I did away with wealth. Penny pinching, that kind of thing. Instead, the players are encouraged to just give a kind of generalized description of what their lifestyle is. And now it's funny because I just listened to your podcast about Apocalypse World 2nd Edition, and it looks like we have a bit of a convergence there in the idea of just giving a verbal description of your lifestyle and then living up to it, so to speak, in the narrative. Because I feel that a lot of things are very narratively driven, that they don't need numbers to be associated with.
Yeah.
You're wealthy doesn't mean that you have a specific... Like, there's no number that when you go higher than it, you're suddenly wealthy, right? It's a lifestyle, it's not a number. So yeah, and there are a couple of other... All of my guns are narrative guns.
Nice.
In the sense that while there are damage levels, I guess you could say, they are verbal, like they're word damage, not number damage. Minor, major, severe, critical, and fatal, of course, which is, hamburger. But the guns themselves don't do points of damage or dice of damage or whatever. Instead, they have descriptive qualities of spray, armor-piercing, energy weapon, etc., which allow you to describe them doing things rather than just say, I shoot them with my gun. Is you're in a situation where you could take out an entire room if you had the right tool for the job.
Gotcha.
Or not. You're up against thousands of tiny little bug creatures. Your pistol isn't doing much, right?
Right. Sean, what is your favorite move in Uncharted Worlds and why?
Oh, difficult question. I would say that in the Scoundrel career, the Scapegoat move. Scapegoat basically allows you, when you suffer political, economic, or diplomatic consequences, you can pass that on to another character. Either an NPC or a PC. On a 10 plus, you succeed. On a 7 to 9, you succeed, but they know that you pinned it on them. And on a 6 minus, you fail, and they still know what you tried to do.
That is great.
It has caused some very interesting situations in which a player got very apologetic before they even did it, because they're like, I know this is going to go wrong. I know I'm going to get imprisoned, and I'm very sorry that you're going to take the fall for me. Like, they said it, they laid out the whole thing before it even happened. But they're like, this is the way it's got to be.
Nice. That is a good one.
That particular skill has combined very surprisingly with a number of other ones that I wasn't imagining, including someone who took a very loyal crew and basically set up a whole bunch of more or less dummies for himself to take the fall, kind of like with dictators who have their body doubles to to take assassination attempts at that kind of thing. I was very impressed with that one.
That is really cool. Sean, you got me hyped up. You got a second or two? Maybe we could take this to the table, see how it plays?
Sure, sounds good.
It is time to act under fire.
So we start up close on the canister that you're carrying. This hexagonal cylinder around the height and thickness of your thigh with a handle on top. The lights on it are blinking white, which is the code lock has not been opened yet, so this thing is still perfectly intact, which is good, because that's probably your objective. We zoom out a bit to see your sweat-covered hand as you make your way across the terrain, but what terrain are you going through? What is impeding your progress?
Seeing is similar to like Guardians of the Galaxy. So he's on this barren, rocky planet, and he's having to climb up this deep red and beige colored rocks. He's got to keep hold of this canister. It's still glowing white.
Are we talking ruins around him, or are we talking just pure natural terrain?
Natural terrain leading up into ruins. We got to have some ruins. That's good.
Of course. Right. Your shuttle, Night Runner, is parked around here somewhere. But unfortunately, you had to take a little bit of a detour because, well, part of the ruins just explodes into a cloud of dust. Who are the jacksockets who are firing at you behind you? What faction do they belong to specifically? Because this isn't just a small group of individuals. No, you have managed to piss off some important group.
It's the Hungan slavers. I hate those guys.
Okay, so they have probably been following you for a while, and you thought you lost them once or twice. You had to make a few detours, but they are right on your tail. You can see them climbing up behind you. There are several ridges that you've just left behind, and you can see their mismatched armor, heavy carapace stuff, and their wide assortment of their weaponry, everything ranging from, like, chains with rusty hooks on them, all the way up to, like, vibro swords, because obviously they don't make their stuff themselves. They just take it from whoever that they take captive. Which reminds me, that's probably what they want to do to you. So the question is, what do you do? You're staring up another rock wall face, and down below you are these slavers who are making their way up.
Well, I've got an antique blaster. Could probably pick off a couple of them, maybe scare them from, rocky. Are there any loose rocks? Maybe I could start a little something here.
You want to try to start a landslide below you or above?
That's what I want.
Below,
no,
yeah.
below.
Right,
I'm a smuggler.
of course.
I'm not an idiot.
All right. So you're just basically opening fire on the ledges ahead, like down below you.
Absolutely.
Trying to bombard them down. All right. So as you're doing that, they're of course trying to make their way around, and they are firing up with like an assortment of plasma bolts, laser shots, and regular shots. So this is going to be a open fire. It's a direct firefight, but your target isn't them per se.
Right.
So what you're going to do is you're going to roll plus metal.
All right. I love rolling metal. Sounds awesome.
METTLE for those listening, of course.
Oh, man. You ruined the illusion, Sean. All right, here we go. Got a +2 in this. I rolled a 7. That is a 9.
That is a 9. All right. On a open fire, what happens is that we get to go back and forth on the description.
Okay.
At some point, I get to throw in a consequence, but you still get to control the overall success of the attempt. Anyway, back into it. You're starting to fire. They're making their way up both left and right. At this point, you can see an easy way to topple down an entire huge old ancient statue, like a ruined statue. That will give the other group a chance to make their way up onto the same level as you.
Yeah, I gotta take it.
You can also just keep them all pinned and start climbing again, but that's not going to get rid of them as a threat.
No, I'll take my chances with this group to my left. I'm gonna take down that huge statue of that pig riding whatever, and yeah, I want to see a few of those slavers go down.
Alright, the statue is underlit with greenish-blue glow as your plasma rifle takes chunk after chunk out of it. The whole thing just cracks, turns, and collapses. Just a scream of the slavers that are down below as the whole thing just covers them in dust and debris. All right, you've got the other group of slavers coming in on your right. You're pretty sure that you can outrun them because they're all really badly equipped with, like, mismatched armor.
All right.
But that still means exposing your back to them.
Well,
do you stand and fight, or do you try to run?
Oh, it is better to run and fight another day. I've got a lucky long coat that I'm hoping will help me out here, and I'm going to take off.
All right, you start booking it across the jagged, uneven ground. The sky overhead is, like, filled with lightning, and as you see, like, purple clouds are rolling in. This planet is not exactly the most pleasant place in the world. Shots are ricocheting left and right, and go ahead and face adversity using physique.
All right. I'm going to roll 2d6. My physique is not that awesome. I have a -1.
You needed to work on your cardio.
I know, right? Well, the vapor, that's not as bad as regular cigs, right? Oh,
right, of course.
Oh my goodness, that is a 5.
All right.
5.
You make it, I'd say maybe 10 steps before a bolt just catches you in the shoulder and spins you 180, sprawling you across the ground. Go ahead and brace for impact. Brace for impact is how your lucky long coat is going to hopefully save you.
All right.
Use your armor roll, which is in your assets there.
All right. My armor roll, I have a +1 armor from that bad boy. So am I trying to roll, so I mentally know, do I need to roll low like on a normal harm roll? Do I need to think low numbers here, Sean?
No. You need to think high numbers because this is you bracing for impact. The better you brace for impact, the more the severity is reduced.
Okay. All right, here we go. Think high numbers like normal. Okay, good. Oh, man.
Oh, no.
I just rolled snake eyes. That's a 3.
Oh, no. Okay, so on a 6-, you suffer additional effects in addition to the severity of the shot. So I'm going to ask you to, well, if you were writing this down, I'm going to ask you to write on your character sheet that you now have a severe wound, gunshot, in your shoulder. Additionally, that canister that you're carrying just skitters and tumbles and clink, 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 back down the hill that you just climbed. You just see it rolling down. Surprisingly, the head of these slavers, big, huge, bearded guy with a bunch of nuts and bolts bolted into his beard, just screams, "After it! Forget the loser!" And they all start clambering and sliding and tumbling down the slope after the canister that you're after. Now, you've got a massive gunshot wound in your shoulder, but they're not chasing you anymore.
Yeah.
Which faction is going to be really pissed if you don't get that canister back to them?
Oh, well, the hoplites, but, I've got favors I can pull in on them. I think I'm running for the Night Runner.
All right, so you're clambering up and you can see them, like, there's actually a race now amongst them to claim that canister. You make it back to the Night Runner, and I gotta ask, as the shuttle door, very empty shuttle door closes, what was in that canister that was so important?
It is a very rare mineral that is an extremely powerful fuel source, an unrefined state. That's why I had to come to the ass into nowhere for this damn thing. Yeah,
all right. So now that the slavers have their hand on it, are we talking a sale that you could interrupt, or are we talking, what are they going to be doing with this?
Oh, it'll be a sale, and I'll just have to circle back around and take out whoever buys it.
All right. Well, I would be looking forward to that in the next episode, but I think that we can call that there because you made it out with your life. You're gonna have to see someone about that bullet hole in your shoulder.
Yeah.
You're gonna be piloting one-handed for a little while.
Phew, man.
But at the least, you weren't taken hostage.
Stupid slavers. Man, that was good. Well, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate it. Thanks for running me through a little bit of Uncharted Worlds. That was great.
Thank you very much for having me.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community and Richard Rogers. You can find us on gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and McGay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Arl Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko Metal version and Process. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Arl Hotbed on their website, savagearlhotbed.com.